Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take sources you suggest and really dig into them, pull out the key insights for you.
That's right. And today we're looking at Contu.
Confucius, yeah.
Exactly. We're working from excerpts from the Vietnamese Wikipedia page on him. And the goal, really, is to get a handle on who he was, the core of his ideas, no Jiao, and, his huge impact on East Asian culture that's still felt today.
It's massive, isn't it? Often called the ultimate Chinese sage. Billions of people still influenced by his thinking. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Who was Kung Tu?
Well, his birth name was Kong Ko, and his courtesy name, Trump Ni. He lived a long time ago, 551 to 479 BCE.
Right, the spring and autumn period.
Exactly. A time of big changes, often conflict in the state of Ol. That's Lu in modern spelling. And the names Kongtu or Kongfutu, they both just mean teacher Kong.
So, titles of respect.
Shows that people saw him even then.
And the name most Westerners know, Confucius. How do we get that?
That's an interesting one. It came much later, from Jesuit missionaries. They were trying to transliterate King Fugs for European audiences.
I see. So it's a Latinized version, basically.
Pretty much. And over the centuries, he accumulated some seriously impressive official titles after his death, like Bao Tan Tuyen Nikong, Van Tuyen Vung, it goes on. Aitan Fuyin Fran Shitan Tiansu.
Wow.
And finally, Aitan Chitan Van Tuyen Ving Tansu. It really tracks his growing importance.
That list alone tells a story, doesn't it? Okay, what about his family, his background? Was he born into this influential sphere?
Well, yes and no. His ancestry, traced back, was actually quite aristocratic, back to the rulers of the state of Tong who were themselves descendants of the Shang dynasty kings.
Okay, so high-status roots.
Definitely. But there's a twist. One ancestor, Kongfrid's sixth generation from a Tong ruler, a high official, he got caught up in political trouble. Killed.
Ah.
Yeah, so his son had to flee, ended up in Ellis. So there's this history of both nobility and, well, upheaval.
A bit of drama in the family tree, then. And his parents, his immediate family.
His father was Thuk Lung Hot, a local official in a place called Tu, but the circumstances of Kong Tu's birth were unusual for the time.
How so?
His father was old, like over 70, and he married Kong Tu's mother, Na Thik, who was only 18.
70 and 18, wow.
Yeah. Because of the age gap, it was apparently called a dahup, a wild union.
A wild union, huh? That's quite a phrase. And his name, Kong Ko.
The story goes that his parents prayed for a son at a place called Ni Ku Hill. Ku means hill, and Ni was part of the courtesy name.
Ah, makes sense.
He was the son they prayed for, even though his father already had 9 daughters and an older son who had a disability.
So he was hoped for, but then tragedy struck early, didn't it?
It did. His father died when he was just 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he and his mother were left in poverty. He had to work various jobs just to get by. You have to think that seeing life from that perspective, the hardship, must have influenced his later thinking about society and ethics.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder how he went from poverty, to becoming this, well, legendary teacher.
It seems like he had this incredible drive to learn. From about 15, he just threw himself into studying ethics, rituals, history, you name it.
So a real thirst for knowledge.
Definitely. He got married at 19, had his first son, Li, courtesy name Ban Nge, the next year. And by 22, he was already teaching.
22. That's young to start attracting students.
It suggests he learned fast and was keen to share it. A key moment came when he was 30.
What happened then?
The Duke of Elam, Duke Zhao, gave him a carriage and an attendant so he could go to Luoyang, the Zhou dynasty capital.
A big opportunity.
Huge. To study the imperial laws, ancient texts, rituals, right at the source. When he came back, his reputation really started to grow. More students flocked to him, even though the ruler of Elan didn't actually employ him in any official role yet.
So, respected as a scholar, but not yet in government. Did that change?
Not immediately. Around 35, there was some kind of internal conflict in LA, and he had to leave for a while. Went to the state of Qi.
Another state.
Yeah.
Did he find favor there?
He actually impressed the ruler, Duke Jing of Qi. The Duke apparently thought about giving him land, making him an advisor.
Right.
But one of the Duke's ministers talked him out of it, so Kontu eventually went back to LA. He just kept teaching, researching. The sources say he might have had up to 3,000 disciples by then.
3,000. That's incredible.
Yeah, though maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. But it said 72 of them were particularly close, really got his teachings.
The inner circle.
Yeah.
Did he ever get that official position he seemed suited for?
He did, eventually. When he was 50, he got his chance. Appointed as a magistrate.
Okay. Starting in local government.
Right. And then he rose up, became Minister of Public Works, and then Minister of Justice in LA.
So pretty high up.
Definitely. And he used the position to push his ideas. He advocated for reforms like trying to curb the power of the big aristocratic families.
Trying to put his philosophy into practice then. Centralizing power, maybe?
Yeah.
Or making it more merit-based?
Seems like it, aligning governance with his ethical principles. But it didn't last that long.
Why not? What happened?
He resigned when he was 55. The feeling seems to be that he felt his advice wasn't being properly listened to, or maybe the political realities were just too entrenched.
Frustrating for him, I imagine.
Must have been. So after resigning, he spent the next, 14 years or so traveling.
Traveling where? Doing what?
Going from state to state, Wei, Song, Chen, Kai, trying to find a ruler who would actually implement his political philosophy.
And did he?
Not really. He was often received respectfully. People knew who he was, but no ruler fully adopted his program. It's quite a story of persistence, though, sticking to his ideals for so long, despite the lack of political success.
14 years is a long time to be pitching your ideas without a buyer. What did he do after that?
He finally returned home to LA when he was 69, old by the standards of the day. And he spent his last few years focusing on, scholarship. Writing, editing, compiling the classical texts.
Laying the groundwork for his future influence, even if he didn't achieve his political goals then.
Exactly. He died when he was 71, maybe feeling like a failure in political terms, but his intellectual legacy was just beginning.
Which brings us neatly to Nojiao Confucianism. What's the essence of his philosophy?
At its heart, it's really about ethics, both personal ethics and how government should be run ethically. It stresses proper social relationships, how people should interact, concepts like justice, sincerity, and especially Ren.
Ren, that's often translated as benevolence or humaneness, right?
That's right. It's a core virtue. For many in China and across East Asia, Confucianism became more than just a philosophy. It became a way of life, a framework for society, influencing everything from family structure to government, even folding in elements you might call religious, like ancestor veneration and ritual importance.
So it permeated the culture deeply. How did it become so dominant, especially after his own political struggles?
Well, his followers kept his ideas alive. They became one school of thought among many during the 100 schools of thought period. They did face suppression, famously under the Qin dynasty.
Right, the book burnings and all that.
Exactly. But then the Han dynasty came along, and they revived Confucianism. They made it the official state ideology. That was crucial.
State backing. That makes a difference.
Huge difference. And it wasn't static either. It kept evolving. Later, during the Tang and Song dynasties, you get what's called Neo-Confucianism, which blended in ideas from Buddhism and Taoism, adding more metaphysical layers.
Fascinating how it adapted. Now, the source mentions attributed works, the 5 classics, the Ngugkin. What are they? And did Kung Tu actually write them?
Okay, so the tradition says Kung Tu either wrote, edited, or compiled these foundational texts. Modern scholars are a bit more cautious, saying his exact role is hard to pin down definitively for each one, but they are central.
Right, so what are they?
You've got the Kin Ti, the classic of poetry, a collection of, 300 poems, folk songs, hymns, used to teach proper emotions, clear expression.
Poetry as moral education.
Kind of, yeah. Then the Kin Tu, classic of history or book of documents, records of ancient rulers, their speeches, deeds, meant as examples for later rulers.
Learning from the past. Makes sense.
Then the Kin Lo, classic of rites, sometimes called Lu Ki, record of rituals. This details all the ceremonies, the etiquette for social interactions. Super important for maintaining social order, in his view.
Ritual as social clue.
Precisely. Number 4 is the Kin Duke. The I Ching, or Classic of Changes, that's the really philosophical one, based on yin and yang, the 8 trigrams, divination. Kung Tu supposedly added commentaries, the 10 wings, explaining its deeper meaning.
The I Ching, yeah, that's probably the most famous one in the West.
Probably. And finally, the Kin Sun Tu, the Spring and Autumn Annals. It's a chronicle of his own state, LA. The tradition is that Kung Tu selected the events and worded the entries carefully to pass subtle moral judgments. History with a purpose.
So, using history to teach political lessons. That's the 5. Was there a 6th? The source mentioned Kinnak.
Ah, yes, the Kinnak, the classic of music. It discussed music's role, instruments, but sadly, most of it's lost.
No, shame.
Yeah, This survived within the Classic of Rites in a section called the UG Record of Music, but the original standalone text is gone. It's often considered the lost sixth classic, and of course we absolutely have to mention the Lucena, the Analects.
Right, that's not one of the classics, but maybe the most direct source for his sayings.
Exactly. It wasn't compiled by him, but by his students after his death. It's a collection of conversations, sayings, anecdotes, probably the closest we can get to hearing his voice.
So, through all these texts, what are the absolute bedrock principles he taught?
Well, number one is probably filial piety, Shao. Respect for your parents, your elders, your ancestors. He saw this as the absolute foundation. If the family is stable and harmonious based on respect, then society and government can be too.
The family as a model for the state.
Precisely. He emphasized these hierarchical relationships. Father, son, husband, wife, elder brother, younger brother. But it wasn't just about obedience. The superiors had duties too, to be benevolent, setting a good example.
A system of mutual obligation.
Exactly. And then there's the principle everyone knows, even if they don't know it's Confucian, the golden rule.
Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself.
That's the one. He phrased it negatively. What you do not wish for yourself, do not impose on others. But the essence is the same. Empathy as a guide for ethical action.
Timeless advice, really. Okay, so wrapping up, what's the lasting legacy here? We know the idea spread, but what else?
Well, one amazing thing is the Kong family itself. His direct descendants living in Quafu in Shandong province.
They're still there.
Oh, yeah. And for centuries, emperors honored them. They were given titles, estates, specifically to carry on the rituals, the worship of Kongtu. Since the Qin dynasty, basically continuously.
That's incredible longevity.
It really is. The main title holder became known as the Duke Yansheng, Duke extending sagehood. That title passed down through generations right into the 20th century. Later, it became official of sacrifices. It's one of the longest family lineages with official duties in the world.
Wow. And his status in Chinese culture generally.
He's revered, considered one of the 10 saints of Chinese history, just a monumental figure.
So let's try and sum up this deep dive. We've seen Kung Tu, the man, the scholar, the teacher, facing poverty, political setbacks, but always driven by learning and ethics.
Right, and we've touched on the core of No Jiao, the focus on relationships, ethics, benevolence, sincerity, filial piety, ritual, all aimed at creating a harmonious society and good government.
Plus the incredible influence through those classics and the Analects, shaping thought across East Asia for millennia.
And thinking about it, some things still stand out as surprising, don't they? Like the wild union circumstances of his birth or his sheer persistence traveling for years trying to sell his political ideas.
Absolutely. And that family legacy, the Duke's Yunsheng, carrying on for so long, it's quite something.
It really makes you, the listener, think, doesn't it? How do these ancient ideas about social harmony, ethics, respect for elders, how do they resonate today? Do you see them playing out in your own life, your own society?
Yeah. Are they still relevant in our fast-paced, often individualistic modern world?
Which leads us to maybe a final thought to leave you with. Kongtu put so much emphasis on order, on ethics, on knowing your place and fulfilling your duties. How do you think his philosophy would grapple with the kinds of challenges we face now? Things like rapid technological change, globalization, diverse values.
Complex questions. Would his focus on stability clash with the need for constant adaptation? Or would his ethical core offer a guide?
Exactly, something to ponder. How would Confucianism adapt, or what wisdom could it offer for the 21st century? Definitely food for thought.